Good morning. Welcome back to part three of our series on resentment. And today we're going to finish this up by talking about what to do to eliminate resentment in our lives. The first step in eliminating that is to become aware that resentment is even present. And we've talked quite a bit about the problems and challenges of becoming aware of that, and so we don't need to cover that again. But that's the first step. Once we have an awareness that we're having that kind of problem, that we're having this resentment thought pattern and thought cycle, now we get to have a choice. And we're faced with three choices, basically: to continue on as we've done before and not change anything, to try and bury or suppress that resentment, or to be constructive and do something about it. So just a few words about the first two. Obviously I'm not going to be a fan of either of those, but just a few thoughts. The first one, not doing anything to change that, oftentimes is associated with a thought of I can't, it's too hard, or it's not worth it. Is that really the case? Is that really what we think? And it comes down to that mindset comes down to being educated about that, and knowing really what are some of these downstream effects of resentment. And I don't think that that's a viable option in any realm or in any situation or in any circumstance, because it is going to cause problems, which is why I call it a psychological cancer. Number two, burying or suppressing it. As humans, we oftentimes try to compartmentalize things. In our homes, we have storage spaces, and things go in their own individual spots, and we try and keep things clean and organized that way. How often do we do that same thing in our lives with our thoughts that we have, and the associated emotions and actions that go along with that? We try and keep things separate, isolated, in their own box, spot, in their own realm. And on some level, most of us get pretty good at doing that because we do it so often. But compartmentalizing, what is it really? It's just a mechanism of resisting. It's a mechanism of pushing things off, putting it on the back burner, and of not dealing with it. Anytime you do that with something that's negative, what happens is it gets bigger. We think that if we just ignore it, it'll go away, it'll lessen, but that's just the opposite of what actually does happen. Negativity strengthens, it gets bigger, it creates a bigger problem and a bigger hold on us the more we try and resist and bury and suppress that. So again, I'm not a fan of that option, and I know from my own experience even that people can get by with that strategy for quite a long time. And the problem with employing that strategy is you stay on that slippery slope, but you don't stay static in one place. That slippery slope is a dynamic, active, moving thing, and that's what you do. You just keep sliding down that slope, making more and more rationalizations, more and more justifications, and exhibit more and more behavior that's not consistent with who you are or who you would want to be. So I'm not a fan of continuing using that option. So option number three is breaking free from this resentment and overcoming that. And first, I want to say, because resentment is so common and it's so complex, it's likely going to be a problem to one degree or another for all of us, throughout our entire lives, just because there's so many things that are involved in that, and it comes from so many different directions and so many different sources. So I do want to say that, just in terms of, this isn't something that's going to be just a couple months or even a couple year type problem and we can just wait it out. No, it's going to be with us our whole lives, and we need to learn how to deal with it rather than ignoring it or burying and suppressing it. So the first step is learning and educating ourselves about it. Well, the first step, again, is awareness, and then with that awareness that, okay, we have some resentment processes and thoughts and a cycle going on, then to learn about it, educate yourselves, read about it, and even more importantly than that is to look deep inside yourself, to examine your thoughts, question those thoughts, and decide, are these thoughts helpful in terms of me moving in the direction that I want to go, or are they not? And from an education standpoint, that is probably the key, because all of us, yes, there's a lot of commonalities with resentment, but all of us, it's going to be a little bit different. There's going to be a little bit different sources, a little bit different triggers, different situations and circumstances that bring it up in our lives. And so we need to educate ourselves. What are my individual triggers? What are my individual indicators that a resentment process is going on? Because I can tell you mine, and those might help some. They might help tremendously, and they might help not at all, because my triggers are individual for me. And so you need to find out what your triggers and your indicators are. Once you have found those and learned those, it's time to start taking responsibility and owning those things, and owning that it's your problem. One of the things that we talked about in a previous video was blaming. We don't want to own things. We don't want to take responsibility for ourselves, or more particularly for our own crap. And so we have a tendency as humans to blame other people. And that will keep you stuck. That will keep you in a victim role, and that will keep you in a resentment thought cycle. So we have to take responsibility for ourselves and realize, okay, this is my stuff. But the great thing about that realization and that admission is, once we do, now that power that we had given away before because of blaming, because of other negative things, we bring right back to ourselves, and we become not the victim anymore. We become in charge. We become the quote-unquote captains of our ships. And we can do the things that then are necessary for us to break free from this cycle of resentment. But we have to take responsibility for ourselves first. The next thing that we also need to do, and this is oftentimes the most difficult part of this, we have to accept ourselves. We don't like looking in the quote proverbial mirror. We don't like seeing the whole of ourselves. We're very careful to construct an image and a facade that we want people to see of us, and how we want to be recognized in the world. But those facades are fake. Meaning, not that those kinds of things aren't part of us, but it's only a part of us. And when we ignore this whole side of us, the negative side, the things that we don't want people to know about, the things that we're ashamed of, the things that we're embarrassed of, and we hide those kinds of things from the world, that's a facade. And we create that, and it limits what we can do to heal ourselves, and it limits what we can do to break out of a resentment thought pattern. So we have to accept that we're human. We have to accept that we have weaknesses and flaws, and that's okay. We readily say that about other people, and we recognize that in other people, but we don't give ourselves the same break. We don't give ourselves the same benefit of the doubt, the same latitude that, yeah, we're just like everybody else. We're also human and flawed, with those weaknesses. And to ignore that part of things, that's not acceptance. That's resistance. And just to throw this out there, Buddha, there's a phrase from him that says, suffering is a result of our resistance to what is. When we do accept ourselves and accept the whole package, the good things, the bad things, the things that we wish that we could change, the things that we wished had never happened to us, what does it allow us to do for ourselves? It allows us to be kind, it allows us to be compassionate, and it allows us to be loving to ourselves. How can we share that feeling and convey that to others when we don't feel that ourselves? When we can start to do that for ourselves, we can then start to carry that message and share that message with others. We can start to become a light, but we can start offering that same gift of kindness, compassion, and love to others, rather than blaming, rather than judgment, rather than looking down on somebody, rather than superiority. Any number of dozens of negative things that we can do. But when we accept ourselves and start to love ourselves and are kind and compassionate with ourselves, we offer that to others, we offer that to ourselves. But it's interesting what also happens. It starts to change us. It changes the thought patterns, it changes the neural connections in our brains, and it changes our hearts to where we become softer. We become more refined. We become gentler. We become more the people that we would want to be, more the people that others want us to be, want to be around, and we're able to have more of a positive influence on our lives and on the situations that we individually are faced with, that our families are faced with, that our loved ones are faced with, that our friends are faced with. We become able to be in control rather than being controlled. We're able to take a step back. We're able to take a pause. We're able to take a few seconds or a few minutes to breathe, and to be able to think clearly, to be able to be intentional rather than reactive. And this is true for resentment, this is true for anger, this is true for any negative thing that you can think of. The more we can back up a little bit, accept ourselves, be kind, compassionate, and loving to ourselves, the more we are going to increase our ability to handle whatever negative thing comes up in our lives. The last thing that I want to talk about is practice, practice, practice. this is not easy. Learning how to to break free of resentment, learning how to manage and control your thoughts, learning how to feel emotions rather than burying and suppress them. It's hard work. So recognize that, and when you fall short, when you mess up, because you're going to, realize that that's okay. That's expected. We're all gonna mess up, all the time. But like I said, these problems, particularly resentment, are going to stay with us, for most of our lives. And so we have lots and lots of opportunities to continue to practice. The last word that I want to say is be consistent as you can. And again, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to fall short on that. But the more consistent you are at continuing to be aware and learn and watch and manage, the faster that changes are going to be made, and the more effective that you're going to be in recognizing when a resentment thought process is present. You're going to be much more capable and better able to more quickly break out of that thought pattern and that cycle. Again, it's hard work, but you can do it. It's hard work, and it's worth it. One last word: if this is something that's helpful and beneficial to you, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. Drop a comment on this, and I thank you in advance for that. I love you guys. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon on the next topic. Bye.